This podcast is brought to you by Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine for those that love to make and drink great beer. Learn more online or subscribe at beerandbrewing.com or find us on social media at Craft Beer Brew. Welcome to the Craft Beer and Brewing Podcast. I'm your host, co-founder, and editorial director of Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine, Jamie Bogner. This is podcast episode 235, and joining me is Barrett Tillman from BlackMan Brewing. Welcome to the podcast, Barrett.
Thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here.
You have an interesting story, having come out of an American brewery there in Dallas, Texas, and having taken a sabbatical that has into Costa Rica that has turned into a much longer presence down there. You have done everything from exploring mixed fermentation beers to finding ways to blend tropical flavors, tropical fruits, and other ingredients, finding some ways to build authentic expressions in collaborative ways with breweries around the United States, as well as through Central America. We're going to talk about all of those things on this episode. But first, for nearly 30 years, G&D Chillers has set the mark for quality equipment you can rely on. G&D stands above the rest as the only chiller manufacturer that engineers your glycol piping for free. G&D also stands alone as the only chiller manufacturer with an in-house team of installers and engineers with 30 years of real-world field labor experience in breweries, wineries, and distilleries. Contact the Total Glycol System Design experts today at gdchillers.com. Also, support for this episode comes from Hop Solutions by BSG. The Hop Solutions portfolio is a joint effort between the brewers, hop specialists, and brewing scientists of BSG and the RAR Technical Center that takes a flavor-first, application-specific approach to hops. Whether you're seeking biotransformation in a juicy IPA or dialing in a classic West Coast profile, BSG has a hop solution for that. Get in touch with the hop nerds at BSG by emailing letstalkhops@bsgcraft.com for samples, spots, and contracts. Quick mention that if you're a brewery planning, visit breweryworkshop.com for more information about our upcoming brewery accelerator in Portland, Oregon this July. Barrett, let's talk about your brewing history. You're in Dallas, Texas right now, and that's where you were before you decided to take off on this sabbatical for Costa Rica. But talk to me about this arc in craft beer for you, how you got into brewing, how you got into beer first, and then how you decided to pursue a career in brewing, and then where that took you and how you ended up trying to or exploring that career from a home base in Costa Rica.
Wow, that's great. That's my story in a nutshell. We can wrap it up there. You said it better than I could. Yeah, I mean, for me, Dallas is home. Dallas has been home for a while. I started homebrewing here in Dallas, and Dallas has the opportunity to be a part of North Texas Homebrewers Association, which was founded in 1985. So it's one of the longest standing homebrew clubs in the United States. So when I started homebrewing, I was a part of that club. And so there was a lot of information that was just dumped out of that club. I mean, we followed things like George Fix's book, Michael Jackson's books. And you had to know style if you were going to take your beer to the homebrew club and see what they thought of it. So that's kind of how I got started in beer. And I was just super excited about beer at the time. I was working an IT job, traveling a lot. I kind of burnt out on my job, and making beer in a garage with my friends was great. I could be social all over again. Everything else was just being a nerd, IT, computer stuff. No one wants to talk about that.
Brewing is nerdy too, but in its own specialized, cool, nerdy kind of way.
Yeah, it was three of us when we got started, and we kind of split up roles, and the yeast role landed on me. So I immediately got the technical part of it. So that's really how things changed for me. Just reading Chris White's book on yeast, and then trying to find yeast that would be appropriate for the beers that we were making at home, and just kind of took off from there.
So you found this kind of specialized interest in yeast because your crew of homebrewers that you brewed with assigned you the yeast task.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It's funny how an arbitrary thing like that from an early day could come to kind of define a career in some ways.
Yeah, and I'm cheap, and so my friends were buying yeast, and I was buying expired smack packs and cropping those up, and it just kind of grew from there. After a while, my friends were like, "Do you have this yeast?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm pretty sure I have it somewhere." And then we would make a batch of saison from something that I'd cropped up from like an expired thing at the homebrew store.
What'd your fridge look like back in those days?
Oh man, the fridge looked like a homebrewer's fridge. I mean, you open up the refrigerator, and like I had pounds of hops. Like probably like 16 varieties of different hops. Stuff that you bought because it was cool.
Sure.
And then yeast, man. I had vials and vials of yeast. And I was playing around with like some media stuff, so it was quite crazy. I had some stuff that I tried to put on slants. I had things in my freezer. I had things in my refrigerator. Had things in my closet. Had things in my bathroom. It's all over the place. It's homebrewing.
Sure. So how many years were you homebrewing then before you said, hey, I want to try to do this professionally, or I just don't have any other choice. I have to pursue this professionally because it's taken over my life?
Oh, wow. Man, that's a great story. So like I said, I got into beer with three guys, and we split roles, and I got the technical role, and I really liked the yeast aspect of that. And I was reading a bunch of blogs. I think I was like number 7 follower on Mad Fermentationist. I was following a guy from California who I've never met this guy before. I only know him as an internet person. His name's Simon Ford. And he sent me my first bottle of sour beer, and I hated it. I absolutely did not like it. I wanted to love it, but I wasn't ready for that flavor expression. And so, yeah, I'd spent some time with the homebrew guys, and typical story. You're trying to make good beer, and you're in competition with your buddies. So after about 3 years of making beers and getting super focused on sour beers specifically, when my buddy Simon Ford sent me an email back, he was like, "Hey, maybe this style isn't for you," It was heartbreaking, and getting that email
sounds like
back
a challenge.
From him.
Sounds like a challenge.
It was a challenge. I was like, because here's the thing. He had this beer that had been in his basement. He was a home brewer, and he was in California, which is like the mecca of that kind of stuff. And he had it in his basement for like 2 years. And he posted that he was bottling it, and I was like, I've been watching this beer for 2 years. I want to know how it tastes, and I get this bottle, and I don't like it, and that was quite heartbreaking. And so from there, I kind of wanted to get technical about it and see what I could like about that style. And he helped me out a lot. He pretty much gave me a list of beers to try. And that list of beers, you couldn't get many of those beers in Texas at the time. And so then it sent me on a scavenger hunt for this thing. And and I remember first liking Petrus Golden. And I was like, but I like high fruitiness and high acidity. And that became like my signature way of approaching that style. So is that enough homebrew stuff?
Sure. Were there other beers that just stood out and helped tell that story to you, or connect you to this whole style?
Yeah, definitely Petrus, because it was on the sweeter side, but it had the sour notes in the background, and then followed by that it was Rodenbach, right? And then then it started to kind of morph into these artisanal expressions, And then I asked for more of his beer back. And now that kind of set the tone. And I was running around with my job, like traveling and things like that, harvesting yeast from wild things, fruits and grains, and just trying to kind of make beer my own. And what I noticed was, if I put a beer in a competition that didn't taste like any other beer, it probably would win something, as long as it was technically well made and it placed itself within a style, it'll probably get an award. I remember the first batch of beer that I made with the guys. It was a partial mash, and we did saison, and that saison took a third place award in one of the local competitions, and it was the first beer I'd ever made. And I was like, what made this beer so great? Well, when I fermented that beer, I just stuck it in the closet, airlock blew off of it, and I had this vacuum siphon thing, and that has like a plunger where gas would escape, but it would kind of block it from going back down. And I was like, I'm pretty sure that beer had wild yeast in it, and that's what made it so exceptional. And so it just, my interest kind of started from there.
Interesting. And so, so you homebrew for a number of years, you've got all these yeast experiments going, but you did then leave your IT job and go work for a brewery for a little bit.
Oh, wow. Yeah. I started homebrewing in 2009, and that was approaching like 2012. I was a madman at about that time. The first year I did 75 batches of homebrew. Oof. And then, yeah, it was crazy. It was absolutely crazy. I was in love. I was passionate about it. I would come home from work on a Wednesday night, and I do 2 batches of beer. As long as I could get started before 6 o'clock, I'll be cleaned up before midnight. So that was like my Wednesday thing. And I would try to structure 2 batches of beer in, because I would make something standard and then something cool, So yeah, that's how I got to 75.
So you're this madman homebrewer, but you then decided to, again, leave the IT career and explore a career in brewing?
Well, I'll tell you what happened. In December of 2013, my mom passed away, and I had this passion for brewing at that time. And I was like, fuck it, man, life's too short to not do what you love. And so I said, I will look for a professional career in 2014. And so in 2014, I started working as master ciderist for Bishop Cider here in Dallas. And that was a good introduction into production fermentation. And then I had worked out a sweet deal with them where I just had to come in to produce cider, and so I transferred my hours to nighttime hours, and I got really good at fermenting cider. So I had a lot of free time on my hands, and I had a salary that I needed to make up for. So I roasted coffee for a year that year. And I volunteered at breweries. That year, I did an apprenticeship down at Cedar Creek in 7 Points, Texas. I did some work with Four Corners here in Dallas, and then I started to bounce around with my yeast project, and then kind of went from there. So yeah, I got into professional brewing because my mom passed away, and that kind of shook me up, and I was like, hey, I got to go for it,
Well, and what other breweries did you work for? And then what year did you then decide to take off and explore this Central America, Costa Rica project?
All right, let's give you a timeline. So 2014, I started professionally. 2015, I launched a yeast company, BlackMan Brewing, dry yeast for sour ales. And then at the end of 2015, I started working for Deep Ellum in October 2015. I started working for Deep Ellum and released the first kettle-soured production kettle-soured with Deep Ellum. yeah, just within that same month, because I had already had the yeast and bacteria, just needed a production facility to go for it. And I was talking with John Reardon, and John Reardon was like, hey, we want to bring in you for a specialty program. Let's go from there. And so I came in 6 months into that. The head brewer walked away, and that just meant my shoes got bigger. Pay didn't increase though. And then, you know, like I was over everything at that point, on the production side, you know, and then Deep Ellum was growing super fast. You know, that was the goal, to diversify the portfolio, all tanks full, and see who we could sell to. And right before they announced the sale, things were just kind of getting shifty for me. You know, like I felt like I was in a position where I was drinking too much, you know, and I didn't have a strong personal foundation. And what happened that really shook me up there is I came home after shift beers, pull into the driveway, spitting sunflower seeds out of the window, and an officer walks up to my car and he's like, hey, what's up? And I'm like, who are you and why are you here? You know, and 15 minutes later, I'm in the back of a cop car, you know, with the DWI case. And I'm like, holy shit, you know? And so that was in 2017. And I was like, I'm championing this industry, but, you know, like I don't really have much to show for it, you know? And so as I'm trying to navigate that, you know, mental health, you know, physical health, you know, taking care of yourself while also having the pressure and the stress of, you know, like being in the industry of brewing, being in the industry of alcohol, you know, late nights, heavy drinking, you know. I tell people during that time, my resting blood alcohol content was over the legal limit. That's resting, you know. Functional alcoholism is a thing, you know. And so that's really the need to take a sabbatical. That's really the need to kind of take yourself seriously and put your life before your job. And I think that's kind of where I'm at now.
A lot of people go cold turkey and just get out completely, but you have figured out a way to kind of manage that.
Oh yeah. So at the time, you know, like the only way to live and be responsible is to take responsibilities for your actions, you know. And so here I was, you know, like in the highlight of my career, you know, like looking at a DWI case. You know, like in DWIs in our industry is common. Why is it common? It's because, you know, like you're going to have a 9% beer at a bar. You know, if you walk into a bar right now, all of the double IPAs start off at 7.5%, you know, and they're sweet. So, oh, okay, cool. You know, like I drink that like soda. Soda's sweet too. Let me have 3 of them, you know. As soon as you had the 1.5, you're at the limit right there, you know. And so to get in your car and drive, yeah, you can operate a motor vehicle, you know, just like soccer moms operate a motor vehicle on Benadryl, you know, it's the same thing. However, we're in our cars a lot. We drive around a lot. We're representing the industry a lot, you know, and cops are everywhere, you know. You may get pulled over for a tail light. You may get pulled over for speeding. You may get pulled over for not turning on your turn signal, you know. You didn't get pulled over because you were driving recklessly. You got pulled over for one of these things, and you just so happen to smell like alcohol because you've been in a brewery all day. You've been in a bar all day. So there you go.
And it's a compounding effect for you as a black man. You know, I mean, the social reality and the statistical reality is that you are at a greater risk of being pulled over already, and now you've added that extra factor to it.
Yeah, it's an easy thing, you know, yeah, it's easy to be targeted in that way, like any sign of aggression. And like when this officer walked up to my vehicle in my driveway, I'm like, what the hell is going on here? Like what's happening? And I
you
knew
were arrested in your own driveway.
Oh yeah.
Oh man.
It's okay. Like this is the country that we live in, and the truth is it was then my word against his, you know what I mean? And so and so how do you fight that? You fight that with money, you fight that with years of time. There's plenty of people that have DWIs. There's plenty of people that tried to fight DWIs and couldn't get out of them. And so it was more of a reality check for me,
Yeah.
And I take that as a great sign, because I remember standing on the bar one night, because we do this kind of stuff, I'm standing on a bar. And this was at one of the big festivals that we were having. And in Texas, we like to do this thing called shotgun. Yeah. And encouraging 300 people to shotgun a beer. And I'm like, what am I doing? What am I doing? And so when I climbed off of the bar, when I was finally off of the bar, my best friend in brewing was there. He runs a local brewery here. It's called Intrinsic Brewing and Smokehouse. And I said to him, Kerry Hodson, it's like, that's the last time I'm going to do that. And that's the last time I shotgun a beer, because, like there's this industry appeal that you have to be this flannel wearing, bearded, like drunk alien who's really great at making beer, but it's also really great at handling beer. That's an alien. No one can do that. That ends up being a hard time for your friends and family. It's a great time for people who came by the brewery to meet, like the brewer. But like you talk to ex-girlfriends and ex-wives, and they can tell you a different story. So.
Sure. No, that kind of idea that craft beer needs to be driving a party all the time is one that I hope we are and can move from. That there are different moments to enjoy craft beer, contemplative moments, quiet moments, family moments, social occasions that don't require excessive consumption, that can enjoy, focus around just enjoying these kinds of creative expressions without going there. But you're right. There is that kind of expectation that you're the head of the party if you're the head brewer.
Yeah. And it's also a leadership model as well. Like the leadership model for the industry, it can be whatever you desire it to be. And so I wanted to kind of come out of that so that I can tell my own story. Like I said, at the time we were like the fastest growing brewery in North Texas, now that we're into the hard stuff, like I don't want to name drop anymore, but, we were the fastest growing brewery in North Texas for a reason, like we had created that space and runway, and, we worked really hard to maintain it, and to get the company to a point where it's sellable, that takes a lot of work. It's not just an entrepreneurial effort, it's beyond an entrepreneurial effort, like you're asking a lot of people and the brand. And so I wanted to be out of the community before we sold to someone big that would just kind of capture the spirit of that, but not be able to navigate it. And, like this, I was in the space where, like after 3 years in the beer industry, it was taking a toll on me, and that was the toll. And that was the price that I was going to have to pay. Like I was going to either have to pay that price in my health, or I was going to pay that price out of my pocket, but it was coming from somewhere, And so I took it as a sign, like when you talk about, like this kind of case, the case that I have with my DWI is something easy that I could have fought, tooth and nail, and I probably would have got off, but it wasn't worth the fight for me, I remember looking at the case and I was like, let's let the judge decide at the end of the day, how this thing plays out. And because what I found out is while I was championing the industry wasn't necessarily going to have my back. I wouldn't be able to leverage the lawyers that we had on retainer. I wouldn't be able to even get a salary increase to help me financially cover the cost of this stuff, and a magical moment was happening. We were releasing some of the best beers that I've made in my life, like using yeast and bacteria that came from the company that I started from my garage, with my homebrew story. And here I was pushing a pallet of bottles, a pallet of beers into an 18-wheeler with my signature on the side of the box, and I was in this weird fight for, well, what is my own personal identity? Have I just given too much to this industry? And so in that moment, I was like, okay, let me touch base with all of the people that's close to me, and so I talked to all of the managers at the time. It's like, where are we going with this thing, And the focus for the next year was going to be to release some specialty stuff and the focus on 6-pack beers, because the 6-pack beers, they were the beers that made the money. They were the beers that grew the business. We had a really nice blonde and a really nice IPA, and the push was going to be for a Mexican style lager, because you go and you hear Bart Watson talking in the conferences, and he's like, okay, the next best thing is going to be to target the Mexican community. Let's hit them with a lager. And so that's what we were going to do. And that's a business. It's not that thing that you started in your garage with your buddies, and you felt like a local hero with your homebrew because you were giving it away for free and everybody liked it, And so, yeah, I was at that point and ready for a change. And so that was 2018.
Yeah. Trying to find some more community around it, the kind of community that you'd built out of homebrewing and that you felt there that seems to kind of get lost in that bigger corporate push. Let's talk about then moving to Costa Rica and exploring some of these, smaller, more niche fermentation ideas, and definitely talk about some of your approaches to brewing and yeast there itself. Before we do that, is your brewery struggling to source or afford berry ingredients? Historic heat waves devastated U.S. berry crops, causing supply to dwindle and prices to skyrocket. That's why brewers are switching over to Old Orchard's craft concentrate blends, which mimic straight concentrates, but at a better price point and with more reliable supply. Is it any surprise that Old Orchard's best sellers are raspberry and blackberry flavors? Reclaim your margins and order your craft concentrates at oldorchard.com/brewer. Also, as craft beer's most trusted point of sale system, Arrived is the mobile all-in-one solution you need to decrease service friction and increase guest satisfaction. With a full suite of craft-specific features, no contracts, and no monthly fees, Arrived provides the necessary tools to help your brewery grow. Go to Arrived.com to set up a free customized demo. That's Arrived.com, ARRYVED.com. Remember, there's no I in Arrived. So you get out of this, and I imagine, part of what typically comes with DUI, and I know, or DWI, and I know this because I have also had friends that have experienced the same thing, is a limitation on your own ability to drink. I don't know if that was Texas law and that happened, but I imagine it was a little bit of some legally induced timeout that also gave you some time to think about things. But you then decided to go international and get out of the United States for a little while. Talk to me about that.
Wow, that's great. So yeah, my case was interesting, like with the DWI, because I wasn't technically driving. I won some of the smaller things, but when you go to court and you're facing a jury may kind of lean into more of the moral stuff, right? And morally, yes, I had been drinking, so therefore I was sitting in the car, so therefore, yeah, it kind of adds up, but that's not the real story. And so while I was going through that, I got a call to come down to Costa Rica. They were like, "Hey, we're looking for someone to talk about yeast and specialty beers for this conference called BeerX in Costa Rica." And it was a great call. It was a call from one of the suppliers, and they were trying to get some stuff into that market, and it was going to be like an education summit. And I was like, I'm in a weird spot in my career. I'm thinking about quitting my job, man. And he was like, "Yeah, we still want you to come." And I was like, "Okay, cool. I'll come." And so I remember at that time I didn't quit my job while I was on probation, right? Which is that's a difficult thing to do. So for the bulk of a year, I was at the job, still dealing with the probationary period. What did that look like? That meant that you didn't see me out.
Sure.
That's what that meant. And so being able to go to Costa Rica was a blessing. Like it was an extension of my professional career. And I had one stipulation, like if I was going to travel out of the U.S., I had to talk to a probation officer. And he was like, "What are you going to do?" It's like, "I'm going to a conference to talk about beer." I was like, "This is what I do for a living." He was like, "Well, yes, you can go." And so then I was off to Costa Rica. And so, like I usually don't get asked that question because I usually don't lead in about DWI, but I think that it's important, and I think that it's important for the industry, and it's important for storytelling. Beer is about stories, and what I have always liked about beer for me is beer was the thing that allowed me to be social. It was the thing that allowed me to actually have friends who like to do social things together. Nerds. I like to nerd out about hi-fi audio. It's going to be me and frumpy old guys who have lots of money who can afford very expensive things. That's social, but it's not community social. It's not diversity social. It's bringing people together that's of an elitist class. And so to me, beer is a vehicle for everybody. I can get together with friends and talk about specialty beer, or I can go fishing with friends and have a nice light lager, and kind of go from there. So when I first came to Costa Rica, I had that to deal with, and but I wanted to first experience the culture and the people, and kind of go from there. So in 2018, I went to Costa Rica, and I was like, I'm going to take some BlackMan yeast down to, it was 2018. I'm going to take some BlackMan yeast down to Costa Rica, and I'll do what I do in the US, offer the yeast for free so that I can do collaboration projects so that I may be able to maybe open up the market with the product. And if not, we'll have some good times making beer. And so I took a personal business trip to Costa Rica first, and I did 3 batches of beer with guys there. I did a beer called Smoke and Lit with Treinta Cinco and Ignacio Castro there. Back in 2018, I did a beer called Sacred Nance with a brewery called Irreverente. And Fernando Mora there. I mentioned those 2 names because those 2 names now partnered up, and they're onto a nice project that's new for Costa Rica. And then I did mead that used my bacteria in the mead, and the mead was with Costa Rica Meadery, and not that all of those spaces are still doing good things in Costa Rica today. And so I just felt like I had a great introduction to Costa Rica even before needing to go to Costa Rica to give a talk about, like yeast and specialty beer and stuff like that.
At what point then did you decide that you needed to live there for a certain number of months out of the year?
Wow. So whoever goes to Costa Rica, you are welcome. You can come stay on my couch. Just get out of the U.S. and come somewhere. You are invited. And that's how people are in Costa Rica.
I'm in.
Yeah,
I'm in. I'll come down and see you.
Yeah, can you surf? Where you want to go?
I'm a mountain biker, not a surfer. But Blake, our media sales, he spends a lot of time in Costa Rica, makes a trip every year, and they surf. So yeah.
Man, yeah, I definitely prefer the mountains. I like the solitude of big dark structures that hides animals and creatures and yeast and bacteria and microflora and microfauna, all kinds of stuff. So I prefer the mountains. Yeah. And so I went to Costa Rica, had that great welcoming with the beers, and that allowed me to have a product that people could taste. And then when I came back to give the talk, I could kind of tailor the talk to exactly where the people were, to give a high level presentation that has a lot of terms in it that, and it's not about the terms. It's really about how you use them. It's not about experimentation. It's what does the end product taste like, And so what I did with the presentation that I would normally give is I just dumbed it down. And at the time I had already been playing around with wild yeast in a very homebrew way, meaning I would take samples from the environment and I would drop it in a little bit of wort, and I would smell it, I would taste it, and if I liked it, then I would selectively move on to the next thing, So here's the process on that, like I would let's make it simple, sanitary baby bottle. Why did I say baby bottle? Because the nipple on a baby bottle has an airlock on it. If it overpressurizes, it will burp. Okay, cool. Put a little bit of wort in a baby bottle and go out into the wild and start dropping flowers, leaves, tree bark, whatever you can find into that wort. Oh, and by the way, you can now squirt that wort onto media, and selective media, and you can see, is it bacteria, is it yeast, and that's just taking a baby bottle and squirting it on the media of yeast, because we've been practicing this stuff for a very long time. And so I got really good at kind of taking the information in, like reading white papers and seeing what really smart people were doing, and then doing that in a very practical way at home and for myself. And so that's the presentation that I gave in Costa Rica. And after that, people could taste the beers at this thing that we called the sour synopsis. And that went over really, really well. And so now that was my second trip to Costa Rica. And at each time I went to Costa Rica, it was great. I had a great experience, right? And so, you come back to the States and you go back to work, right? And so that's what I did. I left Costa Rica and came back to work in the States. However, when I came back, I knew I was going to quit my job. It was over with. It was done with. I wanted to not have to be in the industry and carry the burden of the industry. I wanted to tell my personal story. I wanted to represent my yeast in a new way. And so I hit the road. I hit the road with my yeast product, and I started meeting people. I would drive to pretty much any brewery and do a collaboration with them and with the yeast just to get it out there and kind of go from there. And, like while I was doing that, I was watching the big guys kind of see, hey, there was a little market over here for these kettle sour things, maybe we want to get in on that, And so, like my pitch would cost way more than than one of their pitches. And so come 2019, I decided to shut that down. So I shut the yeast company down in December of 2019. And in that time from January of 2019 to December of 2019, I was still interested in Costa Rica. But I wasn't working in the same capacity that I was before. And so that's what made it really, really special. I was like, how the hell can I get to Costa Rica and not have any money? So I reached out to one of the local suppliers there, and they were doing another festival, and they were like, yeah, we want you to come to the festival. And I was like, you want me to come to the festival? Yeah, I'll come to the festival. What will it take for me to stay there longer? And so that's how that started. I hope I answered your question.
I'm still not exactly clear how you make a living doing this. Is brewing still a primary employment in some way for you?
Yeah, what I'm doing. I'm writing a nice resume. Someone out there is going to hire me based on this conversation. But so how does it work for me? I came back to the U.S. and I had the yeast company, right? And so the yeast company allowed me to have that financial buffer. And it was a difficult time, had a lot going on. 2019 is when my daughter graduated high school, right? And so I was looking over my finances and stuff, and I was like, now would be a great time to take a sabbatical, to reinvest. And so January of 2019, I got invited to go and judge beers, and I needed a place to stay, and I wanted to kind of be in Costa Rica for about 2 months. And so I reached out to the supplier, and I was like, hey man, let's work together somehow. That was Stefano and Alexis wing of Costa Rica. They had a supply company called La Poupe at the time. And then they had two bars, and one of the bars had it was like a brew pub, and I was like, damn it, I'll make beer for the brew pub, and I'll sleep on your couch, and I'll figure it out. And so that's what we did. We would leave the city, and on the weekend we would go rep materials on all of the beaches. And so I got to know the local ticos first, and then I got to introduce new products with the gringos on the beach, And I say it in that way because when you look at Costa Rica, people land in the city, they spend a couple of days in the city, and they head straight towards the beach, And so there's a lot of money along the coastline, but there's a lot of culture in the city. And so while I was there for those 2 months, I was like immersed in the culture. I could pick up the paper and I could read Spanish and I could hear it. I didn't understand it, but I could read it, and I could hear it. I'm still having a hard time with the language now. But that being said, I think that gave me a nice welcome into Costa Rica again, and that also extended my personal story. You want to know the hard knocks that people have faced to kind of craft their career. Not every brewer came out of UC Davis. Not every brewer is going to be as eloquent as Garrett Oliver. Not every brewer is going to have the long-standing history in the industry as a Peter Burkhardt. I think that we have to learn how to tell the full brewer story. It's not all guts and glory for everybody. There's a lot of work out there, and so I landed in Costa Rica and February 2019, and during that time, Ignacio decided to put Smoke and Lit into competition. And every time he put that beer that we collaborated on into competition, it won a fucking award every time. And so, Smoke and Lit it's won the most awards ever. It's best beer Costa Rica, best beer Panama, best beer Central America, and it was a real magical moment for me at that time, because here I was sleeping on people's couches, making beer for the brew pub, trying to rep products on the beach, all so that I could experience this culture in a new way and kind of learn and rewrite my own story. I didn't want to be the brewer that had to walk in and line 300 people up for a shotgun. I want to be able to talk about where the beer came from, what the materials are, who were the people that helped me to inspire the beer. And so here I was, and I was like, man, this is amazing. And so I remember being at a table and watching Peter Burkhardt judge the beer with Jennifer Talley. And Ignacio was like, everyone's on pins and needles about this beer. We don't know what's going to happen. And this was the beer. It was an historic Littenheiner with my bacteria, kettle-soured, and just exceptional beer. And icons in the industry were fighting over how it should end up in competition. And when it ended up as all of those awards, I was like, man, this is all right. I can check out now. Because all of the people that I'd followed and fell in love with were there, and it was an exceptional time. And so on that pinnacle, I landed myself back in the US, February 2019, and kind of went from there. Next question.
Well, let's kind of pull to the current time now.
All right.
But before we do that, from the rotatable pickup tube on Rogue Brewing's pilot brewhouse to the integrated hopbacks on Sierra Nevada's twin prototyping brewhouses, SS Brewtech has taken technology they invented working with world-renowned industry veterans and made them available to every craft brewer. To learn more about SS Brewtech's innovation list, head on over to ssbrewtech.com. Also, are you looking for the tools to make your next improvements in process and quality control? The Mettler Toledo InPro 8630i is the ideal sensor for combined color and turbidity measurement in lautering, filtration, and phase shift operations. Robust, compact, and easy to handle, it supports consistency in beer processing. The InTap portable oxygen meter gives you readings wherever you need them, flexible in production for verification, while purging or for troubleshooting. It's your perfect helping hand. Contact Mettler Toledo today to find out more. So now you split time between Costa Rica and the United States. You come back here and there. You are, I know, from watching your social media as of late, you've been brewing some collaboration beers. You're in Arkansas for a little bit, made a collaboration beer. You're still doing this. When I talked to Kelvin Kolheim last year from Beale Street Brewing, he mentioned that you brewed a beer with with your yeast. You're definitely still getting out there, and you're still, this kind of Pied Piper of various yeasts, kind of spreading these around breweries in the United States as well as Costa Rica. So talk to me about your current brewing focus and and what your current approach is now in the market as it is.
Okay. So my current approach in the market right now is to help others tell story, diversification story. BlackMan Brewing collaboration is about creating together. So what I think that means is let's learn how to profit together. Let's not look at it from a charity model. We're not trying to clean up bad business here. Let's try to profit together, and let's approach it from there. And so as
I love that you say that, because profit doesn't need to be a bad word. Profit's a good thing. Profit represents beer connecting to consumers that enjoy that and want to keep buying it. And that's what creates profit.
Absolutely. And how you extend your brand is you extend your brand through a profitable way. People buy beer. They don't ask for beer for free. Legally, you have to sell it to them. It's tax. And so breweries are used to writing checks. Why are they not writing checks to these collaborators? Especially the ones that are trying to add value to the brewery's brand story. And so I think that the project that I'm working on now is super important, because it's about bringing people together for that reason, to diversify craft beer. What do I mean by diversifying craft beer? We have focused a lot on telling a domestic story to a domestic consumer, right? And what does that mean? You look at the target, the most populated community, and you target that because it's going to make you the most money. And you completely forget about all of the other communities until you need their money too. And so I think that contextually, we all know that all communities drink beer, but you don't necessarily see that in the marketing and the advertising, and even in how we talk about beer, how we take the beer story and we immediately make it a domestic story instead of a cultural story. I think that it's important to take it and let the beer itself tell that story of how people came together to make this beer, why they came together to make this beer. And I think that in the craft and artisanal space, we have the runway to do that. And so that's been my real focus as I try to figure out what to do with my project, because that's really what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to figure out what to do with my project so I can make some money.
Sure. Now, it's an interesting one. And I know that, this world of craft beer that we're in, there's a need and a desire to pursue diversity. Generally speaking, most folks realize that the craft beer world, especially brew houses, I think by the Brewers Association statistics, are 93% white and 93% male, probably even more white than that. It's not a diverse industry, and approaches to try to diversify that can come across oftentimes as disingenuous, cynical, exploitative, trying to tap into communities just to make more money for a brewery rather than for providing or filling some need for that community and connecting in an authentic way with that community and creating products from and with that community rather than products marketed at that community. I think there's a difference there. And it sounds to me like that's something that you're trying to focus on now.
Yeah. Like in the end of this thing, I would like to have a regional brand that's co-packed, and I would like to use my personal brand story in order to find the partnership and the capital to actually be able to launch that, and I think that's my ultimate goal. But I have to do the legwork. I have to do what I'm doing right now, which is trying to keep the brand alive, trying to tell the story, and trying to look at like how the brand can generate profit and where the brand can go, and to reach the right markets. And so what I'm doing right now, when I have to cross the border and visit family and friends in the United States, then I do travel and beer talks and tastings. The beers that I've made have been made in commercial facilities, and so all I need to do is get that beer in front of people and to talk about what the project is like. And so as I'm hitting the streets with trying to identify how I can find partners, because I need partners, how to find capital because I need capital, and to know that the entrepreneurial effort that I'm on isn't something that I can do by myself, and it's something that exists in a male dominated category and a white dominated category. And what does those numbers look like? You said it before. It's actually 75% male and 93% white, and we're talking about global wealth here. We're not just talking about, like the little money that I may be able to make, the little money that the craft breweries may be able to make. Craft breweries still own a smaller percent of this big pie. And so I think that if we can tell that local story, we can build a community around beer that's also healthy. It's healthy for the community. It's healthy for people. You don't necessarily need 300 people to shotgun a beer. Like if you're also telling a community story, if those same people are going to be back in your tap room tomorrow, you don't need them to shotgun 6 beers tonight. It's like, hey man, put it down. Yeah. We'll see you tomorrow. Come back tomorrow. But we're not telling that story,
So let's get into that. I want to talk about that creative process. What does your beer creation process then look like? How do you, I talk about that all the time with folks because, that's, about where it comes from, because some people are inspired by traditions and very specific traditions. Other people kind of, work from a blank slate and think about flavor. It sounds like, that narrative piece, is a big way that you kind of ideate when it comes to thinking about beer, and that you then think about this local connective story in a way that intersects with your yeast focus, but talk to me a little bit about how that creative process works for you, how you come up with beer ideas and how you create new beers.
Oh, that's great. I can talk about it from a homebrew perspective and a professional perspective, because, like I had to learn how to think about beer in a professional way while my passion for beer was very homebrew like. And so, as a homebrewer, your basis is flavor, like you're trying to get a beer that tastes like something else, like in a lot of ways. And I've never been super comfortable with my beer tasting like something else, so I usually start with flavor. And starting with flavor, like I would walk into a homebrew store and I would taste all of the malts, and then I also had brewing classic styles. I also had designing great beer, and designing great beer kind of gave you a bittering kind of characteristic. It also gave you like nice groundwork on like what's the percentages of the malts, and then with classic styles, it gave you something that Jamil Janishev had already won awards on, and so I would look at those books and I was like, but I don't want my beer to taste like that, and so from there, I would find how to place ingredients where I wanted them, and then after it was brewed, I was like, okay, what style is it? And that's a homebrewer's approach. And then
that's a Peter Boucard approach also, let's not worry about a style. Let's just make a good beer. Yeah. And then we'll figure out a way to,
Yeah, man, I've got to meet, like all of my heroes in this industry, and Peter was one of them. And he's a really creative guy. But what I like about his talks now is it's definitely anti-style, So Peter, you're doing the Lord's work out there.
We've got an entire podcast episode where he and I'm in Fort Collins, and he's I drive, or when I bike into work in the morning, I bike right back by the back end of their brewery Purpose. So we've got a great episode where he talked at length about that here on the podcast.
So now my beers start with people, like in Costa Rica, I'm able to walk the markets and have conversations with local people. And that's it's been beyond inspiration. Like to take someone's ingredient that they've hauled out of the mountains and brought to the Central Valley in San Jose, and to take that ingredient and to make something out of it, it's beyond empowering. It's respectful. You take the ingredient and you respect it and you honor it in a very kind of local way. And so that's what I've been doing since I've been in Costa Rica for the past 2 years. I got BlackMan Brewing, SRL, full on business set up in Costa Rica, so that I can learn how to navigate a new market, navigate myself, and use my professional experience, and not to make American beers in Costa Rica, but to make beers in Costa Rica, that's inspired by their people, inspired by their stories, and that's been the drive and the focus of the project. It's been the drive and the focus of the project from the beginning. But, like in being out of the pressure of the U.S., I'm able to express that passion in a way that shows the authentic nature of it. It shows that, yeah, my brand is about creating together with others to tell this story about beer that takes it away from the vices and it puts it into the art form, the community, and the artisanal nature of handmade products.
That's cool. So you are actually releasing beer now in Costa Rica, or are you on the way to release some beer in Costa Rica?
Oh, wow. Let me go back to my spreadsheet. I think I've made 47 batches of beer in Costa Rica.
Nice.
And,
okay. And these are brewed with other breweries primarily, but released in the BlackMan Brewing brand?
Yeah.
Okay.
The way that co-packing works, you know, Heineken don't make Heineken. It's made by somebody else.
Sure.
But with my product, I can go to a brewery, make the product, and all I need to say on the back of the label is where it was brewed and bottled at. And so that's what I'm up to. It's called co-packing.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I've certainly talked to, in fact, Kelvin at Beale Street Brewing is doing the same thing, where the brewing is happening down at Lazy Magnolia, and he's releasing Beale Street Brewing. It's a common, there's all sorts of breweries that operate that way in the United States.
There's a reason why, is because in the United States, it's a 3-tier system. Like you either build your business around manufacturing, you build your business around distribution, or you build your business around retail. And you can open a bar, you can open a local brew pub, you can open a local tap room and tasting room, but like the entities are already predefined, and you have to decide, how can I fit what I want to do into these spaces that legally already exist. So for me, as I look at the context of things, if the beer industry is the cost of entering the beer industry is huge. There's a lot of money tied into just stainless steel, and that's stainless steel that's not installed. That's not hiring a staff to actually, have the expertise to make beer, or have the expertise to sell beer, or have the expertise to even pour a cold pint in a clean glass, And so we usually don't talk about all of those like really granular things when we're having these types of discussions. We usually just talk about the passion of beer, but like to run the business is it takes a lot of expertise and a lot of other hands.
For sure. No, it used to be that like you could bare bones get a brewery going for $350,000, $400,000. Even now, I don't think that's possible with where construction costs are. You're probably talking $600,000 or $700,000 minimum, and probably well north of $1 million to get something set up that can actually produce enough beer to pay people what they need to make from it. If you're not coming from a place where you have, say, collateral in order to secure an SBA loan, or some other way to gin up investment to fund that kind of capital, you're right. It's an incredibly huge barrier of entry that, then that's, I think, one other reason why the more economically advantaged in the United States or around the world are the ones that now are operating and owning breweries, because they also have more of that access to capital, and then, potentially could take risks. The number of people that have had lucrative careers and then decided to open breweries, it's a common theme. It's your theme too, right? You had another career, you wanted to open this. You have somebody like Marcus Baskerville at Weathered Souls who was able to do it because one of his regulars had the access to the capital and was able to put the investment behind him to help going. If you don't have something like that, it's hard to get it. It's hard to grow it organically, and it's hard to make that turn into business to make that kind of thing happen. And so you're right. Naturally, you find ways to do it that aren't as capital intensive, and contract brewing, co-packing, alternating proprietorships, all of these other kinds of modes for using existing, brewery facilities make a lot of sense to start a brand, to see how it works and see how it resonates, to get into that practice of connecting beer to consumers and selling beer. And then, theoretically that can drive interest from the folks that might have money to invest in something like that and, keep it moving forward.
I like how you structured that, because it reminds me, and it reminds everybody that, like, if you want to buy a car, it's up to you to figure out how you're going to finance it. It's not up to anybody else to figure out how you're going to finance your car, and it's the same thing with business. If you want to open up a business, you have to find financing, and you have to buy just the same car. You have to buy a car that you can afford. You have to invest in the business that you can drive, and so that's where I'm at with my project. When I have stronger partners involved in that, then I'm going to do more quite naturally. And what we're seeing now is we're seeing what I'm able to do, like out of my own strength. And I hope that as I'm telling these stories about beer, and as I'm trying to get the name out there, the brand out there, what I'm trying to do out there, that I can make the right partnerships, and we can build something together that will be sustainable. And I like being able to place that in a beer story, because that beer story is also my own story. I'm in that same thing. And I think that the only way to build something that you're going to be proud of is to be self-invested, to be all in. If my heart wasn't in it, I probably would have left this thing long time ago, So that's where I'm at with that part of it.
Let's talk about some of the actual beers.
Okay.
Talk to me about some of the more interesting recent beers you've developed, some of the process behind that, and then some of the things that you've learned through brewing them, whether that's yeast and fermentation, whether that's how to use and employ some interesting or different ingredients in ways that might be unexpected, or finding ways to, put clever twists on certain style expectations. I just want to talk about some of your recent beers, because
wow.
It sounds like you're doing some interesting things. I want to, we've talked about other things. We haven't actually talked about the brewing.
Okay, let's talk about brewing for a bit. So I wanted to take on the challenge of brewing in Costa Rica, and the beer industry in Costa Rica is faced with issues of temperature control. They're faced with issues of capital. They're faced with being in a small market. They're faced with all of the ingredients having to be imported. And things that's imported are taxed while they come in, and then beer is taxed again when it's sold. So these are challenges around beer. So
$24 4-packs of hazy triple IPA are probably not the thing that are going to sell very well.
Yeah, the market is much smaller. You can sell
Sure.
that 24 pack to 1% of the population, and you should do it if you can.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, you should. I mean, there's nothing stopping you from taking
Yeah.
that task on, and so I really came into Costa Rica because Costa Rica felt like the U.S. 10 years rewound. You know, I felt that I could be in Costa Rica at the same time. You know, like Sam Calagione was in, you know, like his garage trying to get Dogfish Head off the ground, and so that's what Costa Rica felt like when I visited, and it was a great time to be making beer. And so since I've been in Costa Rica, I've been, because I like yeast and I like challenges and I like ingredients. I've been trying to ferment without temperature control, right? And how do you answer that question now? You answer that question now with the Kvike yeast, right? The Vike yeast is the answer to that. You know, but the Vike yeast comes with some precursors that you may not like with all of your styles, right? And so how do you navigate that challenge? Because in Costa Rica, refrigeration is the most expensive thing. Electricity is the most expensive thing, you know, and then you're in the market that can't just absorb all of the price that you want to throw at them, right? And then on top of that, you have ingredients that may come in from last year's crop harvest, right? And so I did a collaboration with a brewery called Numu Brewing in Guanacaste, and that beer was released February of last year, and it was a session IPA. Brewed with the Vike yeast, and the goal of that beer, in my mind, was to produce something with my friends that would change the game, and also be something that a local Tico person who decided to come to the beach, they could find an IPA and they could drink that IPA as much as they wanted to without being slapped over the head with bitterness or having a beer that they just couldn't handle. You know, like a 7% IPA on the beach is not what you really want, you know? And so that beer was 4.5%. It was double dry hopped. Like we like to do in production, we get the second dry hop, the first dry hop in during the D-rest, and so that was fun to get that in there, and that dry hop specifically gave us some really nice tropical notes, and then the tropical notes.
What hops were you using in this one?
Oh man, I'll have to look that up. We use what they already had.
Yeah.
But because let me pull it up, you know, because I have spreadsheets for this.
Sure.
And so that dry hop gave us a really nice fruity note. And so what did the beer taste like with that dry hop? It tasted like tropical fruit punch, you know, in the tank, because it still had a little bit of sweetness to it. And it hadn't been completely fermented out. And then in the can, once it was canned up, that beer it sold really, really well. And then the second dry hop went in, and the second dry hop was to land the grassy notes that you like, but not too much, you know. And then let's talk about the water profile on that. The water profile on that was something that was going to finish before the hops and before the malt, and so it would be clean on the palate. And Numu is placed in a really great location because their water comes in pretty much very neutral RO water, and so that part was easy. But getting the hops in there in the right location and not letting the Vike yeast get out of control. What do I mean by that? The Vike yeast can get out of control and kick out this thing that I don't like, which is like a pithy, grapefruit note that's just kind of yeast bittery, and
Mm-hmm.
I didn't like
Yeah.
that. So what we did is we controlled the fermentation on that, and then we let the diacetyl rest go up a little bit to finish the beer out.
I know what you're saying. It's like a slightly, I wouldn't, like an earthy dirtiness, that can come with some of the quake yeast in certain kinds of conditions. That seems to kind of dull some of the hop expression in some of those hoppier beers that I've tasted with the quake yeast.
Yeah, and that's absolutely it. So that beer was no surprises here on the hops. Simcoe and Equinox.
Hmm.
Interesting combination, right?
Sure.
Yeah. And so, like to pull those notes out of the beer and out of fermentation with that yeast was the challenge for that. And so definitely that dry hop at D rest is what solidified our fruity notes. And then we got the grassy notes in there with that secondary, basically the final dry hop.
During the fermentation, did you keep the temperature in a certain range in order to get a certain quake expression from it? Or I'm still curious what you mean by controlling that fermentation.
Yeah, I would have tried to.
Or did you do it with pitch rate? I mean, that would, I guess, would be another way.
No, we didn't. I didn't want to change up the brew house procedures on their pitch rate too much. But all right, this is going to be in C. The temperature for fermentation was 24 C.
75.
75. That's kind of high.
Yeah. But certainly not as hot. I mean, it's certainly not that 80 to 100 Fahrenheit range that quake can definitely work within.
Absolutely. And so that turned out to be a very beautiful beer, and it sold really well. Grist bill on that was pretty standard, just some Pilsner malt and a little bit of Vienna.
Cool. Are there any other beers that posed a interesting creative challenge for you, or that you learned something while brewing from?
Oh man, that's the goal. Like the goal as a brewer, especially someone that hasn't brewed in the brew house. Like head brewers like to pin you to the wall and be like, okay, let's see what you can do. So that was the challenge, and praise the Lord, like I did pretty good on that one, and the beer sold really well. And like usually when I do a collaboration with someone, I'm asking for like really strong BlackMan branding presence. I think that getting the brand in front of people is just as important as doing a collaboration. And so I look at it that way, like how can I get BlackMan's story in these spaces without, like just rolling over the can and seeing in the fine print, hey, we did this with this guy that's called BlackMan. I think that it's important to kind of leverage those relationships to also get a strong brand presence in the market, because it's like this is full on creativity from start to finish. It's like handing someone a $1 million recipe, and like we're not really talking about that in the collaboration space. Like the idea is that you can go on with your brewery and make whatever you want, but if you're coming at it off the streets as a collaborator, you don't have a brewery to go back to. And so, and
it's the old exposure question, right? Like if you're coming at it from an equal standing and are able to share this kind of, you're sharing your audience with the brewery is sharing, this other brewery is sharing their audience with you. And that, it becomes this kind of equal footing to approach a collaboration on, but it's a little different, for you, where you are not, you don't have this physical brewery place, but you can bring an audience that is paying attention to you and paying attention to BlackMan, and you are bringing that audience and helping pay attention to then, and bringing that to, and as well as this kind of creative and collaborative idea to that. And so you're right. I think because there isn't that same kind of parody at play there, you have to approach it a different way. You don't want to be like that bar that's like, to the musician, just come play and it'll be good for the exposure, right? I'm not going to pay you, but I'm just going to give you the exposure.
Yeah, because like you can't eat exposure. You can take your check to the bank and deposit it, and then when you go to the bank for a bank loan for your business, you can show that you have money coming to your account over the work that you're doing. At some point you're going to need to replace your instrument. Yeah, I hope you collected some money for that and not just impressions. That's how I feel about it.
Yeah, sure. Any other beers that stick out in your recent mind that you had particular fun with or learned something from?
Oh, yeah. And let's scratch the surface on this a little bit deeper. So I spent some time with the indigenous community of Costa Rica. And what does that mean? I had a guy who is a linguist try one of my beers, and this guy was like, he was crazy about the beer. His name was Ernesto, and Ernesto Garcia. And he calls me. He's like, "Hey man, how can I get your beer?" And I was like, "I sell it at this place in San Jose, and I sell it at this place in Uvita. You can go to the place in Uvita. It's called Welltail Brewery. You can get it there, or you can get it at this place in the Central Valley called Stolas Market." And he was like, "Well, I'm at Welltail now." I was like, "Okay, so buy whatever you want." and he tries the beer, and he was like, "Yo, we don't have any brewers around that's actually trying to tell a Costa Rica story with Costa Rica ingredients." And I think he had a beer that was made with a sour beer that was made with Mimones at the time that I had made. And Mimones is Rubiton, is Mimones Chino. It's like leche, but that beer was fermented with yeast that I had harvested from the Osa Uvita. And then once the sour beer was solid, then I finished the beer with this local fruit. And the story on the local fruit was really fun, because I was walking down the Costanera, and as I'm walking down the Costanera, I could see a father and son at this fruit stand. And I didn't see them at the fruit stand always, because I would always walk. And I was like, man, this really reminds me of being in the South in the U.S. When I get to this fruit stand, because this is a father and son out here, I'm going to buy something from them. And what they had was they had these Mimones, and I was like, "Hey, what do you have?" And he was like, "I have Mimones. Would you like to try them?" I was like, "No, I think I'm going to put them in cerveza beer." He was like, "You're going to put them in cerveza?" He's like, "That's interesting." I was like, "Yeah, I hope it is going to be interesting." And he was like, "How much do you want?" I was like, "I'll take 5 kilos. And at this time, he didn't have enough plastic sacks to put the Mimones Chino in. And I had my computer bag, and he had this grain bag. And I was like, let's just stuff them all in this grain bag. So we stuff them all in a grain bag, and I get to Welltail Brewery with this 5 kilos of Mimones Chino. And all I can remember as I'm processing this fruit was a smile that was on his little kid's face, and I was like, man, this is why I do this, And so for Ernesto to then drive, because he was from the Central Valley, but he just so happened to be in the area looking for a brewery. For him to drive to the area and actually find this beer and fall in love with this beer, I was like, this is what we're talking about, to use beer as a vehicle for community, and not just community, local community, and then to take that expression international. And so I use that story to tell a different story. So technical things. How much fruit did I put into that beer? It was a 50-liter batch, and I put 5 kilos of fruit. That's roughly 10% Why so much? Because, like you're going to lose something to the fruit. And then after that, the beer got kegged and bottled, and it was sold on site right there at Welltail Brewery in Uvita in Costa Rica.
How'd you process it? Obviously, you're not going to freeze the fruit because that would cost far too much. You just chop? Do you puree? Do you, and then do you do a high intensity infusion and then blend back into a batch? Do you fill tanks with the fruit? What's that method look like for you?
All right. Since this was a 50 liter batch, I peeled the fruit. The fruit has this seed in the center. And so I was like, you know what? I want the full expression of the fruit. And because the fruit tastes really light. So how do I get the full expression of the fruit? I was like, man, this beer is going to take a while, because I didn't want to chop it all the way down to the pit, because the pit of that seed was just really kind of funky, and the seed, the fruit itself can be kind of oily. So I was like, I know that this will do really well on a sour beer that has some structure. I need the pH to kind of be cut while I'm adding this fruit. And so that's another reason why I kept it in the 10% range, so that the pH of the beer could buffer the amount of fruit that I'm adding to it, right? And what do I mean by that? I didn't want to throw the sour beer out of balance because I'm adding too much fruit to it, right? And I also needed the sour beer to finish out the fruit and give me the expression from the fruit, as if the sour beer just kind of leached out the flavor of these Mamones Chino. And so that beer, once I had the fruit processed, I got the fruit in a keg, and then I racked the beer on top of it, right? And then I let it re-ferment on the fruit forever, And then I came back and processed it after that.
Maybe not forever.
Yeah, it took a while. That beer took a while.
Yeah.
And
how long? And did you, as an ambient temperature or?
Yeah, that's an ambient temperature. Ambient temperature in Costa Rica is in Celsius. It would have been like anywhere between 26 to 32 degrees C, which is like, that's a wide range. Sorry about I've switched over.
No, it's 72 to 89.
Yeah. So that's pretty hot. Yeah.
It is.
But the real magic is having a sour beer that can stand up to a watery fruit. So let me say that. So I pulled the when I then racked the beer off the solids, right? So rack the beer off the solids at 3 months, and then had to wait again for the particulate. You get like the powdery fruity stuff, like it would be fruit tannin and stuff like that. To get that to settle out naturally, it's going to take a little while longer. And so that's why that beer took so long.
Again, at ambient temperature, it's not like you can just crash it and drop stuff out.
Yeah. Rack it again and then go from there. And so like there used to be this old technique before we had filtration, is you would just consecutively rack things to get it clear. And sour beer doesn't necessarily need to be clear, especially if it's going to be bottle conditioned. But you're racking it to leave behind the particulate matter. You don't want someone to pour a glass of fruit pulp, so you rack it to get it off of that.
Sure. When you mentioned pH, what is your typical goal for pH with your sour beer?
Man, I would love to talk about that in titratable acidity, because that's a better
Excellent.
thing.
How many grams per liter of titratable acidity? Because I can certainly converse in those kinds of terms too. No, it's good that you mentioned that because pH is not necessarily a sensory term. It's a concentration of ions. It doesn't necessarily equate to the way that people taste things.
Absolutely. And, like on that, we're definitely looking at the lactic component, like that's one that's easy to titrate. But in Costa Rica, I didn't have those tools, and so I had to go in this realm off of, past experience and perception. The only measure that I had at this point was pH. And, like using a pH meter that's not accurate, to be honest, I could give you a number. It's gonna be in the 4 range,
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. So 3.8 pH to like 4.1, 4.0, that's kind of the target.
I would generally equate that with more of the tart realm than the like full sour realm of the 3.0 to 3.3, 3.4, some of the more extreme elements of American sour beer that push that acidity to incredible low levels, or high levels, I guess.
Yeah, I really like high acidity, but I'm going to have to say this: the market doesn't like high acidity. and so like the balance is to get something that tastes like juice, that's acidic as juice, like everyone loves a refreshing lemonade, right? Everyone loves a refreshing orange juice, so the acidity of a tart fruit. And there's a lot of citrus in Costa Rica. And so I've been playing around with fruits, but mostly for their personal expression.
Sure. No, and I think that's a similar strategy that a lot of other American brewers are using, trying to dial that acidity level into that comfortable space where fruit juice is already, because people are happy consuming it at that level. When you talked about natural or with using local fruit, it really struck me because we were over in Belgium for a few weeks and recorded a whole bunch of podcasts. And what you saw there was a lot of brewers expressing their heartfelt love for things like native scarbeck cherries, because those are grown in the area and they've grown up with them. And it was this traditional thing. And in a lot of ways, some of these beer traditions that we have, especially around sour beer, that we've followed and inherited from this Belgian brewing community, have been driven by some of those things. Like the fact that Kriek is such a popular beer style is because that was a fruit that grew in proximity to these Belgian lambic brewers, and they would naturally then use this local ingredient to them. It's interesting from a philosophical standpoint to see sour beer can be made everywhere. These cultures exist everywhere. They certainly exist in Costa Rica. And yet the fruit world is different. They don't grow cherries in Costa Rica. It's a warm environment. And it's much more citrus and tropical fruit.
Yeah.
And it seems that there's this space for embracing a traditional practice if that practice is incorporating local fruit, rather than calling it tradition to use the same fruits that they used somewhere else, something that might not be native to the place that you're making the beer.
Yeah, the style Catalina sour is an example of that. Just in that Argentina, South America tradition of adding fruit to a sour-based beer. But I think that we talk about that expression as it relates to sour beer quite easy, because sour beer can stand up to fruit. It seems to be a good pair, but looking at Costa Rica and knowing that a lot of ingredients come in for beer, like malt and hops come in The local yeast may not make a nice lager, you know what I mean? And so,
right.
and so to express the locale and to express the culture, like that's where in my mind, sour beer has room, and sour beer also has room because it has an expression that goes back to things like chicha, in Costa Rica, corn is popular, right? And so going into a beer that I've done that tells a great story with people is working with Ernesto as a linguist, introducing me to his friend Leo, who's from the Boran community and the Tarabas. When I visited him, he showed me how to make their native chicha, which is something that's fermented with wild yeast that's propagated off of corn, and then that propagation from the wild yeast on the corn is used to ferment a corn-based beverage, and what does it taste like? It tastes sour, and so to take that experience and to try to tell a story of people and cultures that's not just a domestic thing, but it's a cultural experience. I would say that the beer that I did with Vector Brewing Company in Dallas, Texas is an expression of that. It's called Warrior Forest. And that's a beer that's made with blue corn, guava leaves, and Nancy wood. That I got the guava leaves and the Nancy wood while I was visiting the indigenous community, Leo and his family, in the Tarabas of Costa Rica. Smuggled that stuff all the way back to the U.S. to make a beer in the U.S. with those ingredients, and that's what I'm talking about, like honoring the time and the space that you spend with people. I'm sleeping on your couch. How can I honor the story that we're creating together? I don't even know your language. I'm fumbling to express myself with Spanish here, but this experience is something that we can share, and we can continue to tell this story together. And so to be able to honor the time that I've had in Costa Rica with the talent of making beer, the liquid beer part of it is the easy part, but to figure out how to get these expressions into a larger market is where, I need help, so that's
sure.
That's the story.
Where, let's zoom out as we come to a close here.
Okay.
Where do you hope BlackMan Brewing is in 3 or 4 years from now?
3 or 4 years from now, I would like to see BlackMan as a regional brand that's co-packed just like Heineken. I would like the brand to have an expression probably in the lager section that everyone can drink, and assign it to a storyline.
Well, very cool. Very cool. The story is always the important piece there for you.
Yes.
And such an interesting thing to connect that kind of narrative with the liquid in the can or the bottle or the glass. Well, I think that's a great place to close. For nearly 30 years, G&D Chillers has set the mark for quality equipment you can rely on. Get in touch with the hop nerds at BSG Hop Solutions. Reclaim your margins with craft concentrates from Old Orchard. Arrived is the point of sale system designed specifically with breweries in mind. Put SS Brewtech's advances to work in your brewhouse. And Medler Toledo's InPro 8630i supports consistency in beer processing. If you enjoy this podcast each week, we'd love your support. Go to beerandbrewing.com. Click on the subscribe button. If you're planning a brewery, of course, head over to breweryworkshop.com for information on our next workshop in Portland, Oregon this July. Barrett, if people want to learn more about BlackMan Brewing and about what you're doing, where do they find you out there in the world or the internets or everything else?
All right. My Instagram is the place to get the most up-to-date stories and pictures and things like that. I like to do this thing called the listening session, where I release music and talk about my beer journey. It's BlackMan Brew on Instagram, and it's blackmanbrewing.com on the interwebs.
Excellent. Well, thanks for joining with me on the podcast, and thanks for talking with me about your approach to the brewing life, business, and this crazy journey and awesome story that and personal story that you shared with all of us. I really appreciate it. Cheers.
Thank you.
This podcast is brought to you by Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine, for those that love to make and drink great beer. Learn more online or subscribe at beerandbrewing.com, or find us on social media at Craft Beer Brew.